Our story begins during a dark period. In the days when the Philistines ruled over Israel, there was a man named Manoah from the tribe of Dan. He and his wife were unable to have children, and the sorrow weighed heavily upon them. But one day, something extraordinary happened. An angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah's wife as she worked in the fields. "You are barren and have no children," the angel said, "but you will conceive and give birth to a son. He must never drink wine or strong drink, never eat anything unclean, and no razor shall touch his head. He is set apart to God from birth, and he will begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines." Shaken yet overjoyed, she ran to tell her husband. Manoah, unable to believe such a wondrous message, prayed, "Lord, let the man of God return and teach us how to raise the boy who is to be born." God answered his prayer, and the angel appeared again. This time, Manoah spoke directly with him. "Tell us, how shall we raise him? What is his way of life to be?" The angel repeated what he had told Manoah's wife and, after delivering his message, ascended into the heavens in a burst of fire and light. Seeing this, Manoah and his wife fell to the ground, trembling. In time, she gave birth to a son, and they named him Samson. As the boy grew, the Spirit of the Lord stirred within him, and even from a young age, his strength and boldness set him apart. One day, Samson traveled to the Philistine town of Timnah and saw a woman who caught his eye. He returned home and told his parents, "I want her as my wife." His father protested, "Can't you find a wife among our own people?" But Samson insisted, not knowing that this was part of God's plan to confront the Philistines. As he journeyed to Timnah again, something unexpected happened. A lion suddenly leaped out at him, roaring, its golden mane shaking as it charged. Samson had no weapon, no warning, but the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and with his bare hands, he tore the lion apart as if it were nothing. He left its carcass by the roadside and told no one. Later, when he passed by the same place, he noticed something strange. Bees had made a hive inside the lion's remains. He reached in, took some honey, and ate it, sharing it with his parents but not telling them where it came from. At his wedding feast, he decided to challenge the Philistines with a riddle. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. If you can solve this in 7 days, I will give you 30 sets of clothes. If you fail, you will owe me the same. For 3 days, the Philistines were stumped. Frustrated, they turned to Samson's wife and threatened her. "Get the answer from your husband, or we will burn you and your father's house." She wept before Samson, pleading with him day after day. At last, he gave in, and she told the Philistines. On the final day, the men approached Samson with a smirk. "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Fury burned in Samson's eyes. "If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle." He stormed away, traveled to another Philistine town, killed 30 men, and took their garments to pay his debt. When he returned, he discovered that his wife had been given to another man. Rage consumed him. He went into the fields, caught 300 foxes, tied torches to their tails, and released them among the Philistine crops, burning their fields, vineyards, and olive groves. The Philistines retaliated by killing Samson's wife and her family. Enraged, he struck down many of them before escaping to a cave. The Philistines came looking for him, demanding his capture. Terrified, 3,000 men of Judah went to Samson. "Don't you know the Philistines rule over us?" Samson agreed to be handed over, but only if they swore not to kill him themselves. They bound him with new ropes and led him to the Philistines. But as soon as the enemy approached, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he snapped the ropes like threads. Seeing a donkey's jawbone on the ground, he picked it up and struck down 1,000 men. Exhausted and thirsty, he cried out to God, "Will I now die of thirst after this great victory?" Water sprang from the ground, and Samson drank, his strength returning. Years later, he traveled to Gaza, where he spent time with a woman. The Philistines saw him and waited at the city gate, ready to ambush him at dawn. But in the middle of the night, Samson rose, walked to the city gates, ripped them from their hinges, and carried them on his shoulders up to a hill. Then came Delilah. She was beautiful, cunning, and dangerous. The Philistine rulers came to her with an offer. "Find out the secret of his strength, and we will each give you silver." She began pressing Samson for answers. "Tell me, how can you be bound?" she asked, her voice soft, her hands gentle. "If I am tied with fresh bowstrings, I will be weak," Samson lied. That night, As he slept, she tied him with bowstrings and cried, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He snapped the bindings easily. She tried again and again, using new ropes, weaving his hair into a loom, but each time, Samson broke free. Day after day, she pressed him, wore him down, until finally, he could resist no longer. "My strength is in my hair," he whispered. "If it is cut, I will be like any other man." That night, as he lay asleep, she shaved his head. Then she called out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke, but something was different. The strength was gone. The Lord had left him. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him to Gaza, where they bound him in chains and forced him to grind grain in prison. But as the days passed, his hair began to grow again. One day, the Philistine rulers gathered for a great feast in their temple, celebrating their victory over Samson. "Bring him out," they shouted. "Let him entertain us." Blind and weak, Samson was led by a young servant to the temple pillars. He placed his hands on them and prayed, "Lord God, remember me. Strengthen me just once more, that I may take vengeance on the Philistines." Then, with every ounce of strength in his body, he pushed. The massive pillars cracked, and the temple collapsed, killing everyone inside, including Samson himself. In his death, he destroyed more Philistines than he had in his entire life. His family later retrieved his body and buried him in his father's tomb. For 20 years, Samson had judged Israel. His story remains a reminder that though we may fail, God's purpose for our lives is never wasted. True strength does not come from our own power, but from the Spirit of the Lord. I hope this story inspired you. To encourage us, please subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications bell.